So now that we've done a cast shadow and light source for a vertical cylinder, we're going to do this one that is horizontal, or is laying on its side. So the first thing we need to determine is the fact that this this cylinder is lit on this side, the location of the light, and also that this side of the cylinder is going to get most of the light. This side will be in shadow, and the cast shadow will be opposite of the light, so that means it has to be on this side. Maybe some of it will actually touch this box, but if it touches the ground before, it might just curve around. So first thing we need to do is establish that ground plane, establish what parts of the cylinder are actually going to be affected by that light, and what key points we need to transfer. So from just looking at this and knowing that the cast shadow has to be on the opposite side of the light, the key points that will need to be transferred are probably going to be this one, maybe this one, right, and this here, and here's the highest point, or the furthest most point that we see. This is the highest point of the cylinder, but this is the furthest most point that we actually see in perspective, right? We're also going to need this point, and then this point, in case that shadow casts on the ground and we can see a straight line. In order to make that straight line, instead of using the perspective points, we can just use this corner here, drop it down, and then just connect those points. So the cast shadow will very likely extend from here out, right? So we're establishing the ground plane first. Ground, we need this point, right? Because it relates to that one. This point relates to this one, right? So we'll extend those points out. Probably use this one, which is that one. And anything beyond this will probably get too high. So any other point of reference can't really use, right? Because then it actually begins to distort the perspective. So it's taking us away from that ground plane where these objects are sitting on. So the points of reference will be this one, this one, this one, and the other one that we might want to reference would be this. So I can just drop that one down to there. Right, so that would be the furthest most point in the cylinder that we can actually see. So we'll take that one as well from the location, right? Extend that out. Right, so now we have, very likely this is going to be the curve. Right, so this curve will transfer down to here somewhere. Right, so now we got to find out where, and that's going to be where we use the light. Right, so this point relates to this one, so we'll go through here and bring that point down onto the ground. Right, light comes down, hits that ground, so that's point 1. Now we go to this one, so it should be somewhere here. So we're landing right before the box, so that means that this is not going to touch the box. So there's not going to be no cast shadow on top of this little box here. So now we'll bring this one down to match that. I'm going to see through that box, and then we'll erase it out so we can get the volume of this box afterwards. So this cast shadow is wrapping around behind this box. And then lastly is this furthest most point that we see. So we'll bring that down and it'll hit here. So we have this point, and now we need this point, because otherwise this creates this strange end point here, which would not be accurate. this would have to transfer back that way, straight, just like this is. So that means we need to bring this, this point down, not this, but this point down onto the ground plane. Somewhere there. And then from here, this down, so it should be down here. So that's where this and this would connect, giving us the cast shadow on the ground. To that point. So this would be cast shadow. And we would curve this here like that. This mimicking this. And that would be our cast shadow for this object. So the other thing that we can look at is where the light actually strikes this surface. This is the highest most point, but the light is coming down, hitting this cylinder on its side somewhere here. So that means that here we would not see a shadow core. We would see this volume getting darker. So we'll darken that. And then it will start going towards the light. This is the furthest most point, or what would actually be considered the shadow core. So this is the darkest part of the cylinder, because it's away from the light. Then you have this reflected light that gets this spot here, so this area here would be dark. This entire plane of this cylinder would be in shadow. And then you have the cast shadow. We won't bring it all the way there so we can have this box afterwards getting some light. So the darkest area would be here. And then you have reflected light. And then the cast shadow begins here. Pitch shadow, what happened there? This would be the darkest area of the cast shadow. Anything closer to the object would be darker. As it rakes away from the object, it gets lighter or more diffused. And that means that it's getting affected by the ambient light in that space. So the darkest spot would be there. This would also be the area of darkness on the form. And since this is the area where it gets darkest, that would also be the area where it's going to pick up the most light. So lastly, we'll do this little box here. For the box, it's a lot simpler than these. So we'll again go from the location of the light relative to the box, and we'll strike the furthest most corners on the ground plane. We'll extend those. There should be 3. And then the other one, the last one being this, furthest away from the light. Okay, then we go for those top corners. With the light source. And see where they intersect the ground, where it intersects with the ground again. This line represents this line. This line is represented here. And then eventually we'll connect these. So this point of reference is this one. This point of reference is going to be somewhere here. So it hits this about there. Keep it very light. So now we need to connect this point, right? This relates to this. This needs to relate here. So that'll be this edge here is projected down here. This edge here will be projected down here. And the cast shadow of this little box will be like this. The area where the light doesn't hit and is not affected so much by ambient light will be there. Top corner, closest edge. This area here will not get as much light as the top surface. So this surface will get the most light relative to the light source. This would be the lightest. And darken up as it goes away. Because it's a flat plane, it's going to pick up the most light. And then on the sides, it'll pick up some light from top to bottom. And depending on the lightness or darkness of this, you'll have a little bit of light being reflected in this area here, center area of that cube. This corner will be the lightest.